In epistemology, the branch of philosophy concerned with how we know what we know, there is a concept called falsifiability. It was formalized by the philosopher Karl Popper in the 20th century, and it is now considered one of the foundational criteria of scientific knowledge. The idea is this: for a claim to be scientifically meaningful, it must be possible, in principle, to prove it wrong. A theory that can explain every outcome, that can accommodate any evidence, confirming or disconfirming, is not a scientific theory. It is a closed system. It is, in Popper's terms, unfalsifiable. By this standard, traditional Chinese medicine, as a theoretical system, has a serious problem. Not because its practitioners are dishonest, not because every intervention is ineffective, but because the system's conceptual architecture makes it extraordinarily difficult to draw a clear boundary between what it claims and what it can actually demonstrate. That structural ambiguity is not a minor technical deficiency. It is the central challenge facing TCM today, and it has consequences for patients, for practitioners, and for the future of the field itself. I'm Albert. In the first two episodes of this series, we examined the two areas where traditional Chinese medical knowledge has produced results that modern science can verify and explain: acupuncture's demonstrable neurological mechanisms and the pharmacological validity of specific herbal compounds, most notably artemisinin. In both cases, the key intellectual move was the same: separating the observation from the theory that originally framed it. The ancient explanatory frameworks, key, meridian theory, the five elements, were not the source of those discoveries. They were, at best, heuristic scaffolding that preserved the observations until better tools arrived to analyze them. Today, we turn to TCM as a system, not to its occasional successes, but to its institutional structure, its epistemological foundations, and the specific pathologies that make it vulnerable to abuse and resistant to reform. This is a harder conversation. I want to have it seriously. The diagnostic categories of traditional Chinese medicine, deficiency of yang, stagnation of qi, excess liver fire, invasion of wind cold, are inherently subjective constructs. They are not operationally defined in ways that allow independent verification. Two experienced TCM practitioners examining the same patient will frequently reach different diagnoses. The same diagnosis may lead to substantially different treatment protocols. This is not a marginal observation. Studies examining inter-rater reliability among TCM practitioners, that is, the degree to which different practitioners agree when assessing the same patient, have consistently found significant inconsistency. In conventional medicine, diagnostic inconsistency is recognized as a problem to be solved through standardized criteria, imaging, laboratory values, biomarkers. In TCM, diagnostic inconsistency is frequently reframed as evidence of the system's nuance and individualization. Each patient is unique. Therefore, differing diagnoses reflect sophisticated sensitivity rather than methodological weakness. This reframing is intellectually seductive. It is also epistemologically catastrophic. A system that interprets its own inconsistency as a feature rather than a bug has immunized itself against one of the most important corrective mechanisms available to any knowledge-producing enterprise. It has, in effect, made itself unfalsifiable by design. And an unfalsifiable system is precisely the kind of system that bad actors find easiest to exploit. The consequences of this structural openness are not theoretical. They are observable, widespread, and serious. Because TCM diagnosis relies on subjective assessment, pulse quality, tongue color, constitutional typing, and because treatment recommendations are not bound by externally verifiable protocols, the system offers almost no resistance to opportunistic practitioners. The barrier between a rigorous clinician with decades of genuine observational experience and a minimally trained operator deploying the language of the system to extract payment from vulnerable patients is, architecturally, very low. This is not a failure of individual character. It is a failure of institutional design. Honest TCM practitioners, and there are many, are themselves victims of this architecture. They cannot easily distinguish themselves in any externally verifiable way from those who are simply performing the ritual vocabulary of the system without the underlying competence. The system provides no reliable mechanism for this differentiation. It does not generate the kind of evidence that would allow patients to make informed comparative judgments. There is additionally a deeper problem. Because the theoretical framework of TCM is comprehensive and internally coherent, it can be used to explain almost any clinical outcome after the fact. Patients who improve are evidence that the treatment worked. Patients who do not improve can be understood as having presented with a more complex constitutional picture, or as having waited too long to seek treatment, or as requiring a different formulation. The system is not designed to be surprised by its own failures. I want to examine 3 specific institutional tendencies within the current TCM landscape that I believe represent serious obstacles to the field's development. The first is the proposal to restore hereditary transmission as the primary credentialing model. There is a view, circulating within certain TCM communities in China, that the most reliable practitioners are those trained within family lineages, father to son, master to single disciple, over decades of immersive apprenticeship. The argument is that such transmission preserves tacit knowledge that formal institutions cannot capture. There is something to this argument. Tacit knowledge is real. Apprenticeship has historically produced competent practitioners in many fields. But hereditary credentialing, as a primary system, is incompatible with the requirements of modern healthcare governance. It cannot be scaled. It cannot be externally audited. It cannot produce the evidentiary record necessary for comparative effectiveness research. It privileges genealogy over demonstrated competence, and critically, it creates closed transmission chains that are structurally resistant to the incorporation of new knowledge, including the very scientific findings that might validate, refine, or correct inherited practices. The romanticization of hereditary transmission is, at its core, a preference for inscrutability over accountability. The second is the reported proposal to recruit humanities graduates, rather than science graduates, as the primary intake for TCM training programs. If accurate, this proposal represents a significant step in the wrong direction. The integration of TCM into a modern evidence-based healthcare framework requires practitioners who are fluent in the languages of both systems, who can read clinical trial methodology, evaluate pharmacological evidence, understand the logic of controlled experimentation, and engage critically with scientific literature. Recruiting from a population without foundational scientific training does not produce more sensitive practitioners. It produces practitioners who are less equipped to engage with the very body of evidence that might legitimize their field, less capable of distinguishing effective interventions from ineffective ones, and more reliant on the internal logic of a system that, as we have established, does not contain robust self-corrective mechanisms. The effect, intended or not, is to deepen the insularity of a field that urgently needs greater permeability. The third is the assertion, increasingly visible in certain institutional and nationalistic contexts, that TCM does not require external validation, that Chinese medical standards are, themselves, the global standard. This position is worth examining with some care, because it is not entirely without cultural logic. The history of Western medicine's engagement with non-Western knowledge systems includes significant episodes of dismissal, appropriation, and condescension. The defensiveness is understandable, but the conclusion drawn from that defensiveness is not defensible. The claim that a knowledge system requires no external validation is not an assertion of confidence, it is an assertion of closure. Science, at its best, is not a Western cultural artifact. It is a method, a commitment to following evidence wherever it leads, subjecting claims to independent scrutiny, and revising conclusions when the evidence demands it. That method belongs to no single civilization, and no knowledge system, Eastern or Western, ancient or modern, is improved by exempting itself from it. The nationalist framing of TCM legitimacy is not a protection of Chinese intellectual heritage. It is, ironically, its greatest threat, because it forecloses the rigorous engagement through which genuine knowledge in the TCM tradition might finally be separated from accumulated error and offered to the world with confidence. None of this is an argument for abandonment. The position I am articulating is more demanding than either wholesale rejection or uncritical preservation. It is the position that the components of TCM most likely to contribute to human welfare are precisely those that can withstand rigorous scrutiny, and that the most constructive thing one can do for this tradition is to submit it, systematically and without defensiveness, to that scrutiny. The tools now available for this work are unprecedented. Artificial intelligence systems capable of processing classical medical literature at scale, cross-referencing textual records with modern pharmacological databases, identifying pharmacologically active compounds within complex herbal formulations. These represent a genuine opportunity to do, at scale and speed, what 2UU did manually over years of archival research. Several research groups in China, the United States, and Europe are currently pursuing this approach. The early results are promising. Compounds identified through AI-assisted analysis of classical TCM texts are entering clinical trials for oncology, infectious disease, and inflammatory conditions. But this work requires an institutional environment that values evidence over tradition, that welcomes external scrutiny rather than resisting it, and that is willing to accept and to say clearly that some inherited practices do not work while others do. That kind of institutional honesty is not a betrayal of a tradition. It is the condition under which a tradition survives. In the history of knowledge, the systems that endure are not those that claimed immunity from criticism. They are the ones that developed the internal capacity to correct themselves, that built, over time, the mechanisms to distinguish what they knew from what they merely believed, what they had demonstrated from what they had inherited. Traditional Chinese medicine has within it a genuine legacy, thousands of years of careful human observation, a pharmacological record of extraordinary breadth, and specific discoveries, some already validated, many yet to be examined, that have real potential to contribute to global health. That legacy deserves better than the protection of inscrutability. It deserves the harder, more demanding work of verification. I'm Albert. Thank you for watching this series.